The relentless sun beat down upon the parched, dusty plains of Cannae in the year 216 BCE. Massive Roman legions stood ready, their sheer numerical superiority fueling a dangerous, overconfident sense of impending victory. They prepared to crush the Carthaginian invaders, believing their overwhelming numbers would easily shatter the enemy lines. Hannibal Barca, a tactician of unparalleled cunning, observed the Roman advance with a cold, calculated stillness. He stood atop a small rise, his eyes tracking the rhythmic, heavy movement of the approaching infantry. Hannibal had intentionally positioned his weakest infantry in the center, forming a deliberate, convex, outward bowing line. This line bowed toward the enemy, appearing fragile and ready to collapse under the slightest heavy pressure. Meanwhile, his elite African veterans and heavy cavalry remained hidden, waiting patiently on the darkened flanks. The Roman consul Varro, eager for glory, ordered a massive, thunderous frontal assault against the Carthaginian center. The Roman infantry surged forward like a rising tide, their shields locked in a wall of iron. They crashed into the Carthaginian center, pushing the thin, wavering line slowly but steadily backward across fields. The Romans, sensing an easy victory, crowded deeper into the trap, their formation becoming dense and chaotic. They believed they were breaking Hannibal's line, unaware that they were actually being drawn into a pocket. The Roman soldiers pushed forward with reckless abandon, their ranks becoming tangled in the heat of battle. They were effectively surrendering their mobility and tactical control to the genius of the man they sought. The man they sought to destroy watched them walk blindly into his lethal, perfectly constructed waiting trap. Every step the Romans took forward tightened the invisible noose that Hannibal had prepared for them today. The dust rose in thick, choking clouds, obscuring the view of the Roman commanders from the rear. They could not see the elite African infantry waiting silently on the far edges of the field. The Roman formation, once a proud and disciplined machine, began to lose its shape and internal cohesion. Soldiers bumped into one another, their weapons tangling as they fought for space in the crush forward. The sheer density of the Roman mass made it impossible for them to maneuver or swing swords. They were becoming a trapped, suffocating mob, unaware that their numerical advantage was now a fatal liability. Hannibal remained motionless, his mind calculating the exact moment to spring the final phase of his plan. He watched the Roman center buckle further, the convex line now beginning to curve inward like teeth. The trap was nearly set, and the Roman legions were marching straight into their own inevitable bloody doom. The sun continued to bake the earth, turning the battlefield into a furnace of sweat and iron. The Roman soldiers shouted their war cries, confident that the enemy was finally breaking before their might. They did not notice the silence of the flanks, where the elite Carthaginian forces waited for orders. The air was thick with the scent of dust, leather, and the metallic tang of impending, violent death. As the center retreated, the Carthaginian line transformed from a convex arc into a deep, concave crescent. The Romans poured into this expanding void, their momentum carrying them deeper into the jaws of destruction. Hannibal watched the Roman flanks become exposed as the center surged forward, leaving their sides unprotected. He signaled to his cavalry, who had been waiting in the wings, to deliver the final, crushing blow. The ground trembled as the Carthaginian horsemen thundered across the plains, circling toward the Roman rear. Panic began to ripple through the Roman ranks as they realized their escape route was being severed. The trap was closing, and the once mighty Roman legion was now surrounded by a wall of steel. Hannibal's African infantry stepped forward, their spears leveled to prevent any hope of a Roman breakout. The Roman soldiers found themselves hemmed in on all sides, with no room to swing their blades. Every attempt to reorganize was met with a brutal, coordinated assault from the surrounding Carthaginian forces. The sheer weight of the Roman mass now worked against them, crushing the men standing in the center. They were packed so tightly that the dead remained upright, held in place by the living soldiers. Hannibal remained the calm center of the storm, orchestrating the slaughter with precise, cold-blooded efficiency. The Roman commanders realized too late that their arrogance had led them into a tactical masterpiece. There was no path to victory left, only the grim reality of a desperate, final stand. The dust of the battlefield turned crimson as the carnage intensified under the relentless, uncaring sun. Hannibal's men fought with a singular purpose, driven by their commander's vision of total, absolute annihilation. The Roman discipline shattered completely, replaced by the primal, frantic instinct for individual survival. They were no longer an army. but a collection of terrified men waiting for the end. The encirclement was complete, and the Roman legions were now entirely at the mercy of Hannibal. The sounds of battle were replaced by the screams of the dying and the clash of iron. Hannibal watched the final act of his design unfold, his expression remaining unreadable and profoundly detached. He had turned the Roman strength into a weapon against them, proving his genius on the field. The Roman pride, once so vast, was being systematically dismantled by the superior tactical mind of Carthage. Every movement of the Carthaginian line was calculated to maximize the pressure on the trapped Roman force. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long, dark shadows over the field of slaughter. The Roman legions were being erased, their power extinguished by the relentless, closing grip of Hannibal. It was a day that would be remembered for centuries as the pinnacle of tactical warfare. The double envelopment was perfected, leaving the Roman Republic reeling from the magnitude of their catastrophic defeat. Hannibal stood victorious, the master of the field, as the sun set on the broken Roman army. As the Roman mass pressed deeper, Hannibal signaled his hidden forces to execute the final phase. He watched with cold precision as his masterpiece of tactical destruction began to unfold before him. The Carthaginian cavalry swept around the flanks with terrifying speed, driving off the Roman horsemen entirely. Dust clouds rose as the heavy cavalry sealed the rear of the battlefield, cutting off escape. Simultaneously, the elite African infantry swung inward from the sides, closing the jaws of the trap. The Roman legions, now completely surrounded, found themselves packed so tightly they could barely move. Men stumbled over one another in the crushing density, unable to raise their heavy iron swords. Panic rippled through the ranks as they realized the terrifying reality of their precarious, fatal position. The Carthaginian soldiers pressed inward, systematically slaughtering the trapped Romans in a claustrophobic, brutal bloodbath. Blood soaked the dry earth of Cannae as the double envelopment became an absolute, inescapable reality. The Roman numerical advantage, once their greatest pride, had transformed into a truly fatal liability. Every surge of the Roman infantry only served to tighten the grip of the surrounding enemy. Hannibal's plan functioned with the precision of a clock, turning the battlefield into a killing floor. Roman officers shouted orders that were swallowed by the cacophony of screams and clashing steel. The once mighty legions were reduced to a desperate, struggling mass, stripped of all tactical control. By the time the sun began to set, the carnage had reached a feverish, horrific pitch. The fields of Cannae were littered with the broken bodies of tens of thousands of soldiers. This day marked one of the most devastating and complete defeats in all military history. Hannibal had not merely won a battle, he had fundamentally redefined the art of war. His victory proved that superior strategy and disciplined execution could easily overcome mere brute force. The Roman Republic would long remember the silence that followed the slaughter on those plains. Hannibal stood amidst the ruin, a silent architect of a tragedy that would echo through ages. The dust finally began to settle over the field, revealing the grim scale of the loss. Rome's confidence lay shattered, buried beneath the weight of a tactical genius they failed to anticipate. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, dark shadows over the remnants of the legions. History was written in the blood of the fallen, etched forever into the soil of Cannae. The Carthaginian forces stood triumphant, their formation holding firm against the chaos of the day. Varro's ambition had led his men into a nightmare from which there was no waking up. The strategic trap had closed, leaving no room for mercy or retreat for the Roman soldiers. Hannibal's vision remained clear, his legacy cemented by the total destruction of his greatest enemy. The silence of the evening was broken only by the distant groans of the dying men. It was a testament to the power of the mind over the strength of the arm. The Roman dream of easy conquest had evaporated in the heat of the afternoon's brutal fighting. Every movement of the African veterans was calculated to maximize the pressure on the trapped center. The Romans fought with desperation, but their lack of space rendered their training entirely useless here. They were crushed by the very numbers they had relied upon to ensure their own victory. Hannibal observed the final moments with a stoic gaze, his eyes reflecting the setting sun's light. The encirclement was complete, a perfect geometric shape of death carved into the Italian landscape. No Roman soldier could escape the tightening circle of steel that Hannibal had so carefully constructed. The Battle of Cannae became the ultimate lesson in the dangers of overconfidence and poor planning. As darkness fell, the magnitude of the defeat began to sink into the collective Roman consciousness. The legions were gone, wiped from the earth by a commander who understood the battlefield perfectly. Hannibal's name would be whispered in fear and awe in the halls of the Roman Senate. The tactical brilliance displayed on this day would be studied by generals for centuries to come. The carnage was absolute, leaving nothing but the grim evidence of a masterfully executed military trap. The Roman Republic stood on the brink of collapse, shaken to its very foundations by Cannae. Hannibal had achieved the impossible, turning the tide of the war with a single, decisive stroke. The plains of Cannae remained a silent witness to the most efficient slaughter in ancient history. The Roman infantry had marched with pride, only to be dismantled by a superior, cunning mind. The trap was a masterpiece of patience, timing, and the ruthless application of military force. Hannibal's legacy was secured in the blood-soaked dirt, a monument to the power of strategic thought. The Roman legions were broken, their spirit crushed alongside their bodies in the suffocating, tight pocket. The sun finally vanished, leaving the field in the cold, dark grip of the coming night. The victory at Cannae would remain the gold standard for encirclement tactics throughout all human history. Hannibal turned away from the field, his work finished with the precision of a true master. The Roman threat had been neutralized, at least for this day, by his incredible military genius. The echoes of the battle faded into the wind, leaving only the memory of the slaughter. Cannae stood as a stark reminder of how quickly a great army could be destroyed. The art of war had been transformed, and the world would never be the same again. Hannibal Barca had written his name into the annals of history with the blood of Rome.